into that, Dragon Ball Finals, people announced their commentary for it. They announced commentary for it. As far as I understand, the 5 commentators are Yipes, Hell Pockets, Ringe, Tasty Steve, and myself. The 5 of us are commentating. So 4 West Coast commentators, and Yipes is the current lineup. Are we really talking shit about other commentators? I think it's time. All right, so on the topic of commentary, a lot of people were upset that XYZ, etc., that people didn't make it to the finals for commentary for whatever reason, right? You know, some people are like, where's Tyrant and Damascus? Where's Obama and G-Uno? Where's Matrix? Where's this guy? Where's that guy? Why haven't they done this? Why isn't that this guy there? What's the deal with that guy? Etc., etc., etc. I'm not going to go into the, I'm sure that there's a million people that they asked for, right? And so what's interesting to me is that started a conversation about, like, why people are picked for commentaries for certain reason, right? Like, oh, this guy's picked for that reason. You would pick this person for that reason. You know, the reason that they didn't pick these commentators for this, and that, the reason they wouldn't have picked this person is for what, right? So there's like a discussion about, like, who is picked for what. And what it made me want to talk about is there was a list I was coming up with for a while. And it was the list of reasons that commentators, at least in fighting games, I guess it's kind of a general thing, but commentators are hired for events. And the reason that I wanted to come up with this list is because it's something that I think about all the time. It's something that I constantly think about for events. When I want to get hired for an event, I will think to myself, what are all of the factors that are going on around this event that I have the ability to influence to get me in as a commentator? Notice that I didn't say, like, man, if I don't get hired for that, it would suck, right? I'm saying, what can I do to influence my ability to be a commentator for this event? Like, what can I do? And what I'll say is there are times where I feel like I've done a shit ton and I still don't get commentary for an event I want, or I don't get the position of commentary for an event that I want, or I don't get as much money as I want, or I don't get the travel arrangements that I want, or I'm upset at who else is hired alongside of me because I think that they got hired over people that I think, should be hired instead of them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all kinds of stuff. I think it's much more common than you expect that I'm just like, ugh, why is this happening? It's frustrating, right? There's always frustrations and complications that come up when figuring out who to hire for an event. It's a complicated process. I'm thankful that it's not my job to hire people for events. Now, when I think about event hiring, and this is just my perspective, and also I talked to a lot of people who do hiring. So I made a list of things when you are deciding, like, all right, I'm going to hire this guy. I'm not going to hire that guy. I'm going to do whatever. So I made a list of things. This is what I think about when I'm going for an event. So the first one, and these aren't in order of, like, importance, right? I don't have these listed in order of importance or anything. I think with most people, it depends on a number of different things. But the first thing that's on the list, I think, as most of you imagine, is your ability or skill or talent or whatever you want to call the, like, what the commentator is capable of, right? How good they are, essentially. That's, like, the first thing that I have written down. I think most of you guys probably would assume that's one of the big things too, right? And it means a number of things. It means how good you are on the microphone, right? At whatever role you can do, right? Whether that's like how good you are as an analyst, how good you are at being a hype man, how good you are at pumping up a crowd. If you're an MC, how good you are at entertaining a large crowd. If you're a commentator, how good are you at commentating that goes to the house and also it goes to the stream at home. So you're covering 2 different audiences at once. Are you flexible? Are you malleable? Can you work with other commentators? Do you only work well with certain other commentators, right? How good are you at studying? How good are you at keeping up with games if you're like an analyst? How good are you at balancing multiple games? Do you know multiple different games? If you're a hype commentator, how good are you at keeping the crowd excited? How good are you at making big moments memorable? How good are you at selling the big moments? How good are you at doing the championship moments? How good are you at, et cetera, like being charismatic, keeping people entertained, right? Just ability. That's the first thing that I think, ability, how good they are on the mic and whatever their skill set is. Are they very diverse, but they don't have, can they do both roles, but they don't do either one the best? Are they, really, really good at one kind of role but weak in the other? Like, what's their balance, right? Like, for instance, in fighting games, Steve is the best at working a crowd. I don't think it's close. I think that he is far better than almost everybody else at working a crowd on the mic as like an MC, right? I think when it comes to big moments, I think Rip is probably the best overall at doing big moments as a commentator. I think a lot of people like Hell Pockets as big moments, right? I think Hell Pockets is an example. He's good. He just got picked for the Dragon Ball finals, so he's like a relevant example. I think people like Hell Pockets as an example. I think Hell Pockets is really good at the big moments, but I think when you consider something like this, in this case, right, Hell Pockets is really good at the big moments if the big moments are big. The bigger the moment, the better Hell Pockets is. But if the moment's not as big, or if there's less interest in the match, or if the match is... Sometimes as a commentator, you have to carry the match, right? Sometimes the match is up here. So for a commentator, it's very easy to be entertaining or analytical because the match is just that good. What happens when a match is down here? You have a match between two people who have never played before, right? Do you have the ability to make that match interesting or fun to watch or carry that match? That's something that's important too. So I think Hell Pockets' big moments, like you compare it to Rip. Rip just has really good big moments. Hell Pockets has great big moments, but only if the moment is big. You know what I mean? He can't make a big moment out of something that's not a huge moment. You get what I'm saying? So that's ability and talent, right? That's what I'm thinking about for that one. That's the first factor. And the second factor, after ability or talent, is representation. And I think when people hear representation, I think most people will assume I mean gender or race/ethnicity. But that's not exactly what I mean. I think that's part of it. But I also mean representation in location, right? Do they live in the US? Do they live in Europe? Do they live in, Ireland? Do they live in whatever, et cetera, right? Like representation in that kind of location. What's their background? Right? Like Seth Killian has an extremely psychological background. He has psychology, right? So his background is based in that. So his commentary is obviously going to be different than someone who's more scientific, right? Ryan Hunter is going to be more scientific, right? Representation in terms of stylistically, how do they sound on the mic, right? Like, do they have a different style do they represent a different style? Do they represent a different region? Do they sound different because of that, right? Like the way I speak sounds very different than the way F-Word speaks, or the way Tasty Steve speaks, or the way Ringe speaks, or the way Yipe speaks, et cetera, right? So we represent different styles and sounds and locations and gender and race and ethnicity and background, etc., right? So it's important to cover different things, right, for that reason, because you want different perspectives on things. You don't want everybody to sound the exact same, to say the exact same things, to not have different perspectives on things, right? So that's why representation is the second thing I've written down. Third thing is cost. Cost doesn't just mean how much it costs for you to commentate. I want $10 a day to commentate, right? I want $20 a day to commentate. One is a different cost than the other in terms of rate, right? I don't just mean that. I mean, I want $20 a day to commentate. I would also like my flight and hotel taken care of, right? I would also like a per diem per day. I want X amount of money per day to pay for meals and Ubers and etc. Or Ubers. I want Ubers as a separate expense. I would like my Ubers to be paid for this reason. I need a hotel room to myself because, this and that reason. All these things factor in. I live very far from the event, so my flight is $1,000, and I want this taken care of. I want that taken care of, etc. I was just using a simple example. $10 a day, $20 a day. It's simple, right? You can keep track of that in your mind. It makes sense. I didn't use if somebody was getting $10 a day to commentate, holy shit, or even an hour. So that's what I mean, all right? Two commentators could ask for different rates, right? Somebody could ask for $10 a day, and somebody could ask for $20 a day, but one has a flight that's $1,000 to get there, and one has a flight that's $500 to get there. At that point, that's a big factor, right? The cost is a large factor. How many people can you afford to hire? If you hire that commentator, is he so expensive that you can't hire 4 other people? Does their value mean that their costs mean that you can justify hiring them over 4 other people? You see what I mean? That's how cost works. A lot of the times, the highest cost could pay for multiple of middle or lower cost of the same thing, right? Sometimes. depending on rate and flight and et cetera and et cetera. You see what I mean about cost? There's a lot. Relationships is the fourth thing I have written down. Right? The relationships. And I don't mean relationships as in just knowing tournament organizers or the people who do the hiring. That's the first one, right? Relationships in that sense. I also mean relationships in how you built relationships with the events that you've done in the past. So if someone does an event, you go to them and you say, it's me, the TO. I'm working on an event in August. I noticed you did an event back in March and you hired X commentator. Did you like working with them? How was that relationship? And you say, yeah, man, I worked with him. He showed up on time. He did a great job. He was expensive, but it was worth it. I enjoyed working with him. He was cool, right? That's a relationship that you've built. Relationships don't just mean to me, all of this, by the way, is just my perspective. Relationships don't just mean people with like tournament organizers or those who do the hiring or past events that you've done, but also like your relationship to the community. Right? Like how closely tied are they to the community? If they're not there, was the community upset? If they are there, is it expected that they're there from the community? Do they have any other existing relationships with other companies, event organizations, or things that they represent? That's obviously important too. If that commentator's, part of a team, they're a player also. And that happens a lot in the fighting game community. And they're sponsored by HyperX, right? So they wear a jersey and it says HyperX on it. And our event is sponsored by Astro. Is that relationship, is that a factor in hiring, right? That relationship that they have to HyperX or to Panda Global because they're on their jersey or whatever, is that a relationship that's important? So that's what I mean by relationships. The fifth thing I mean is reliability and accountability. So how reliable is someone at showing up on time, at studying for the event if there's someone who's an analytical commentator? If they're a hype guy, how reliable are they at showing up with energy? Do they sometimes show up with amazing energy and it cracks you up all day? Or are they tired sometimes? Do they show up and they have inconsistent blocks? Consistency is a big thing, right? How consistent are they as a commentator? Do they study really hard for some events and not others? Do they know some games super well but not other games super well? And so because of that, commentary is inconsistent. Are they inconsistent when working with certain other people? Do they always deliver the same kind of performance? Do they answer all the emails on time? Do they run into issues where they're out drinking late? Or do they wake up early? Do they show up on time? Do they perform well every time they're on the mic? Do they, are they reliable? Are they accountable for their work, right? Do they care about their work? Do they, do any of that? That was what I had considered reliability. The other thing that I didn't bring up in relationships, but I didn't want to make a separate thing, was legacy. I think particularly in older communities or communities that have been around a long time like ours, legacy is a big factor, right? Guys that have been around a long time or they have a lot of foundation in the scene. That's a big bump for a lot of people, right? Particularly TOs who also usually have a lot of legacy themselves. That's a big one, right? People who've been around a long time, they have a built-up legacy. It is like understood that they are an important part of the community. That's their relationship with the community is founded on legacy. That, gives them some weight that maybe people who are newer won't have necessarily, right? The final thing, and this is one outside of those 5 things that's unique to each person, is whether they have any other factor that's extreme enough to warrant their hiring. If they have humongous social reaches, right? They just have, like, let's say the rest of the commentators that are getting hired have 10,000 followers, and this one has 500,000. That's an X factor. Are they someone who doesn't travel a lot, but when they do, it's a big deal? Are they like Seth Killian, right? Where it's like they have that X factor that makes them extremely unique. Nobody else is like them, and when they show up, it's a big deal. It's like, oh, shit, Seth Killian is here. Is there another X factor? Are they a famous YouTuber? Are they a player? Right? Players, as far as commentators go, have that kind of X factor too. They have the built-in experience. Whatever kind of X factor they have as a commentator that makes them hireable, right? Is there anything else out there? I think Eris has X factors. Seth Killian has X factors, right? There's guys like that have like a big X factor that changes something about them, or something about them is so unique or different or expected that you're like, oh shit, this guy is good. We gotta get him. Cyclops has a unique X factor, right? And he's just so different and weird. That's one thing about him that is like really like noticeably and only Cyclops. So those are the 5 things that I think about. Now, in that topic of those 5 things, I didn't list them in the order that TOs think it's important. I certainly didn't like order it in the way that I think it's important. It's just the way I had written it down, right? But what you have to understand about these things is that they're all weighted differently by different people. And they're all weighted differently for each person. And if there's negatives on one things and positives on other things, they're weighted differently as well, right? So like, you know, for I think most people, they would hope that ability or talent, the first thing I listed, is the highest thing. And they would hope that that's what would get you hired most of the time, right? That's not always the case, but that's one thing that like is important. So, you know, I didn't list them in the order that I think people necessarily look for them or they're interested in them, but I think that's just like, these are the basic things that I think about. So when thinking about these 5 things, you can put commentators on here and think to yourself like, all right, how do I categorize them based on this? So the best example I can use about these 5 things is me. Because better than anybody else, I know me. So if we use these 5 things and we categorize someone and we look at their advantages and disadvantages, we can figure out how they get hired or what are some of the reasons they get hired, right? So let's start with reliability and accountability. We'll work our way back. For me, reliability and accountability is pretty high, probably, right? I'm very consistent. I don't drink. I don't stay out late. I refuse to go to a commentary block or if at all possible, if I don't get 8 hours of sleep. I always plan to get 8 hours of sleep before every commentary block. I answer all my emails. I'm just consistent, right? That's one thing about me that's very consistent. Take all the gigs very seriously, always show up on time, etc. Right? Relationships. I know a lot of people. I know a lot of tournament organizers. A lot of them are familiar with me, and I'm familiar in the community. A lot of people know who I am there, right? I don't necessarily think, like if you compare it to reliability, that my relationships are as high, right? I do know a lot of people, but I don't think the one issue that I have in terms of relationships is that I'm very honest about my feelings in a lot of ways. So if I go to an event and a tournament organizer's like, man, this was sick, right? I would be like, no. What the fuck? There's a lot of issues. Like, why didn't you hire this guy? Why is it like this? Where's my schedule? What the hell are you guys doing? So I'm not going to just be like, yeah, man, it was the neatest event I've ever attended. No fooling. So I don't think I have that advantage. I do have the advantage of knowing lots of people, though, right? Which is important. Cost. I do not have the advantage of cost. I'm not the cheapest commentator. So if you have like the list of where everybody is, right? I'm definitely more expensive than most people. I don't have an unreasonable rate, and I'm very willing to negotiate, but I'm going to be expensive compared to like most new people or most up-and-comers or something, right? So I don't have the advantage of cost. Representation. Smoked. I'm not doing so well there. I'm from the West Coast, right? Which for commentary and fighting games is a strike. I'm a white guy. You're not getting much there. There's a lot of those around, right? Strike. My background is just, I'm a regular. I don't have anything particular about my background. That's a strike. Style. I'm doing okay. I have an analysis, right? I have the analysis. That's like a very unique thing. There's not as many analytical commentators as there are high commentators. I'm doing okay there. I'm doing all right as far as that goes, right? But when it comes to representation, I think a lot of people just assume stuff like, if you're from the West Coast, you get hired a lot. And I think that's true for a lot of West Coast events. In particular, there's a lot of events in the West Coast. A lot of the West Coast commentators get hired a lot. They have a lot of opportunity. But conversely, less often than people getting hired for the West Coast, it is true that people will lose jobs because they're from the West Coast. I've heard people tell me, yeah, I think that this guy is really good. In fact, I think he's better than the other person that we're looking at here. But I can't hire another commentator from the West Coast. We already have 3. We already have 4. I can't do it. I can't hire another West Coast commentator. We have to hire someone else. It can't just look like a West Coast commentary lineup. We have to pick other people. Perfectly reasonable. But if you're not one of the few West Coast commentators that gets selected, that, in terms of representation, could be a negative factor. Like I said, I think I've lost a job to at least all of these categories once. I understand it's totally reasonable. Ability and talent. So far, I think I've lost every category except for reliability. I don't have legacy that much either, right? I don't really have that much. I'm younger than most of the other commentators. I don't have a built-up legacy. Ability and talent is what I've got left as we're working our way up the list, right? So that is probably the only thing that I can improve on. That's like, I can just put my heart into it and all my effort into it and just be better at that, right? In that sense, that's one of the few things that you can just continue to dump time into. You can't change some of these other factors as easily, right? But when it comes to ability or talent, you can just work at that, right? You can just continue to work at that and improve, and that's something that's fixable, right? Which is important. That's an important one to be good at. So really, when I think about events and I think about all the different categories that I just listed you, when I'm thinking for myself, what do I do to get hired for these events? Usually, I can't win in any category but reliability and being good at my job. Unfortunately, I don't really think I have that many other choices based on what I understand to be how they choose people. I can't really win in any of the other categories, right? So for that reason, I think my only option is to just be really good at my job and just be so good at my job that not hiring me is like, people are like, what? Why would you not do that, right? Like, it's like offensive. So that to me is like the only thing that I can do. Now, for everybody else, there's different things here, right? There's different reasons that you might be selected or not selected or whatever, right? And there's other things that people can work on. If their weakness is they don't know enough TOs or they don't know enough people in the scenes, right? They can work on that. If there's, reliability issues or something, right? If your cost is too high, you can change that, right? If your style, right, doesn't clash well, or if you have issues being malleable and working with other commentators, you can work on that. But the ability is just the one one main factor that's like, okay, this is like the one that everybody has to work on. So now I'll take questions. Now that I've done my long speech about commentary. Would I ever do commentary for a game you don't know if your pay was good enough? So the way I commentate is that I only commentate the games that I like. And if I'm going to commentate something, I'm going to take it seriously enough to be comfortable talking about it. So that question it's probably like no. If they offered me a ton of money and it was something I was interested in, I would consider learning it. If they offered me a ton of money, but it's something I'm not interested in, I would turn it down. Am I going to do commentating for MK11? Yeah, probably. I said during the Soul Calibur video that I would try the game and see if I like it. One thing I can tell you about NRS games that's different than Soul Calibur is I played a lot of NRS games. I know I'm going to like the game. I know I'm going to play it, right? So for that reason, I can just say yes. How often do I feel like I'm feigning interest during commentary? Almost never. The exception is like if I'm super exhausted or if there's some like weird condition or something's wrong with the event or there's a bunch of other shit in the way, right? It's very rare that I'm just like there and I'm like not excited to be there. The best commentator in each of these categories, that's hard to say. Well, it depends because like what is the best in terms of cost? When you say the best, is the best person in terms of cost the cheapest? Or is it best the person who's most affordable for their rate is the most affordable for them? Or, it's hard to say. I think you have to factor all the categories in almost, right? Ever worth moving away from the West Coast not to be lumped in? Maybe, but I think for most people, the opportunity they get from living here is probably too good. The upsides of living here are much better than the downsides in terms of opportunity for commentary. That being said, the cost of living is incredibly high. And it's very rare that living here will give you so much work that you will make enough money to live here if it's your primary job. I've thought about moving to Vegas, but I like Southern California too much, even though it's expensive. What do I think of Kenny? His mic ability is very, very good, and he knows a lot about the game, and he genuinely likes the game, which is important for commentary. There are times, in particular with multi-game commentators, where I think that their commentary on their main game is excellent. It's so good. But then you hear them on other games, and it's very obvious they have gaps in knowledge, or there's a lack of interest in the game, and they're just doing it because they're around, or they're asked to, or they're interested in doing it for whatever reason. I think there are times where you hear multi-game commentators do that a lot, and that's something that I try to cut down on this year. On the topic of commentary, we had a discussion earlier on Twitter, and it was just Logan and a bunch of other people talking about the value of commentary and how regional distribution in terms of the commentators is important and should be considered for events. And I think outside of finals events, I don't know that that's necessarily justifiable enough in our community, given the cost and given the budget that our events tend to usually have. What I think about commentary currently in the FGC is that there's a cap or a point you need to hit, and how good you are to be worth being flown overseas. There is a level you need to hit. And I don't just mean that for people coming to the U.S. I mean that in the sense, like, even U.S. How many often do you see U.S. commentators flown to Asia for events? How often do you see U.S. commentators flown to Europe for events, right? Only our best commentators, and only very rarely. It's the same case for European commentators being flown out to the U.S., right? It's the same kind of thing. It's very rare that a commentator is good enough to justify the cost. And the commentators who are that good, not only are they being paid a lot because they're good commentators, so their rates are high, but they're being flown on an expensive flight. They have to be flown in early. They have to have an extra day of a hotel because of the time travel, all that stuff. A lot of stuff comes in when you're hiring someone who's overseas, right? You have to get them in early so they can adjust to the time schedule. There's a lot of shit, right? So it's very rare. And not only that, but I think most fighting game commentators are not good enough or do not have enough value that flying them overseas is worth the budget, right? And what I mean by that is, like, let's say the commentator you're thinking about flying overseas is here. They're very good. They're not the best, but they're very good. And let's say that locally you have commentators that are like this good. They're strong commentators, or even a similar level. There's no reason to justify the budget of flying them over to your event if they're that similar in skill to the commentators you have available locally. There's hardly enough of a gap to justify that. Even if you have like your super strong commentators and you have your S-tier commentators at the top who are above them, they very rarely are worth the money to fly out, they have enough value to fly over the commentators you have here, unless it's a very big event and you have a very big budget. And the production budget is large enough to justify a big spread of commentators who are national and international commentators, right? It's very rare that that's the case. And most commentators do not have enough value to justify flying them for that event, right? Most FGC commentators. It's just like that. It's not their fault. It's just the money doesn't make any sense based on the budgets we have. And the value of a commentator to a stream, although I think is very important, is not as important as you think. You know, the numbers that they will affect on the stream and the experience that they will affect on the stream is often not as big as you'd expect to justify the cost. Very rarely. That being said, this is a finals event. We're talking about Dragon Ball FighterZ finals here. I think that that's probably different. Finals events, right? The budget should be bigger. What you should be looking for in scope of commentators is different. You know, that's like one of those situations. But I just mean in general. So that's what I mean. I think it's very rare that happens. And one thing about commentary is that commentary, like I'm sure all jobs are, the rates are being pushed up. And the people who get hired and paid the top rates get hired and paid for all the events, essentially. A lot of them do, right? But the people below them who are not hired as often for whatever reason are the people who will still benefit from rates going up because it makes them either more affordable or more money, depending on whether they're following the rates or staying where they are. But it makes them more enticing, especially for regional and major level commentary. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they deserve the same, like, you know, getting flown out to different events because they haven't either proved it or their value is not high enough to justify the same kinds of rates, right? That's just how it works. It's just unfortunate that we have so many commentators in so many different regions that are good, hella good, to justify not flying over international talent. Do I have a commentator tier list? You know, talking about commentary is something I like a lot. Talking about other commentators is rough for a number of reasons. One, because if I talked about other commentators, I think I would very quickly have some people frustrated at me very fast. Even what I just said that was very general about people not being as valuable, right? I think will upset some people, even though it's a fact. Sorry, it's a fact. But as far as like making a tier list, I'm not interested in making a tier list. Yeah, I can't do it. Have I ever done solo commentary? That's all I used to do. The first commentary I ever did at a tournament was back in 2013 in Injustice. We had a side stream there where you would commentate on a laptop with a solo headset on like an XSplit window. That's the first commentator I did. And also the YouTube content I did is solo commentary as well. I like doing solo commentary a lot. Did they love me at first? No. The first time I did commentary, people said I was awful. When I first did commentary, people said that I was terrible. Awful. They were like, this fat bitch. He sounds like Ultra David. I hate him. This guy is just the worst commentator to ever be put on a microphone. I hope he dies. I was like, oh, that's fair. Yeah, you got me. Everybody likes High Fights analysis. Man, for those of you that wonder, I read a comment very recently on one of High Fights analysis that was like, man, High Fights analysis is so good. It doesn't have anybody turning and talking to the stream chat instead of paying attention to the match. Ugh, that's the worst. I hate when people do that. And I was like, that could only be one person. They're only talking about one guy. That can't be anybody else. That has to be me. I was like, oh no. Just say my name, you coward. Just at me. I have a Reddit account. Just fucking at me, you sick fuck. How would I feel about the FGC going more grassroots approach than esports? I think this conversation topic will take me very far away from commentary, but it's something that's interesting. I think that's an interesting question because I'll answer your question with this. I think that if fighting game events went back towards more grassroots instead of esports, you guys would like them less than that you currently do. And I know somebody is already upset. They're already typing away. But Sajam, I hate esports. I've always hated esports. Grassroots is the way to go. But most of the things that, in particular, viewers like about our events is the esports part about it, right? The stream chat with hired commentators who are flown out to the event, right? You're telling me that ain't esports, right? That part is not grassroots, right? Flying out commentators from around the world who are paid by the day to do commentary, paying for their flight and hotel is not necessarily grassroots, right? Having an updated bracket, paying people to run brackets all the time that keep these brackets updated, right? Having sponsors who pay for the commentators, who pay for the event, who pay for the staging, who pay for the bracket runners, who pay for the TO, who pay for the streamers, who pay for everything involved with the event, the vendors. That part is esports, right? It's like you have sponsors for the event. Most of the events that people, like Combo Breaker is pretty esports. It has grassroots elements to it, and I think the foundation of it is grassroots. But there are esports part about it, and those esports parts are the thing that people usually tend to like. So, and also another thing that's very confusing to me, and I'll say this: I've never been asked. So I've commentated everywhere. You guys know that I've commentated everywhere, right? I've done all kinds of shit. It's very rare that there's an event or event organization that I've not worked with. I've never been asked to make my commentary more esports, right? In the sense that I've never been asked to like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is an incredible match I've never been asked to be more esports, right? I've been to not curse very rarely, right? It's not even that common to ask to not curse. But I've never been told to not do what I normally do. I've never had someone hire me and say, you know all the stuff you normally do, don't do any of that. It's never happened to me. But I think what does happen to people is when they get to big events or there's big production value or there's nicer cameras or the stream is nicer or it's on, whatever, right? That's, I think, when people naturally tend to clam up a little bit and become more esports. I think it's just they duck because of the staging, right? They're like, oh shit, look at this. I'm in a suit. This is so weird. Like there's lights and the cameras are nice. That camera costs more than what, all the commentators here make combined. It's like $100,000 camera. Like, oh shit. Like it's like everybody gets all weird and they're like, hey, what up guys? It's real nice to be here. Like they're not doing what they normally do, right? Just because of the stage and the size of the event, it makes them a little hesitant. That's more prevalent in hype commentators than analytical commentators. I think analytical commentators doesn't matter. They just do the same shit no matter what. But I think hype commentators, the size and scope of the stage can make them feel real small, and they don't do the same kind of things. I think that the grassroots elements of it, we obviously still want open bracket formats, right? I think everybody likes those. Invitationals rarely are fine, right? But open bracket format, hella. Regular registration that everybody has to go to. No buys or floating to like additional rounds in the tournament, VIP rooms, etc. Really, that kind of shit. Those are the kinds of things that are grassroots that I think we still enjoy. But having a nicer venue and having it like the way people use esports interchangeably with an event having more money, right? That's I sort of think that's what people do. Anytime the production is nice, people are like, yo, esports? It doesn't matter if the production is done by one guy out of a basement. If the production looks nice, the cameras are nice, yo, esports? Some Smash events had a VIP room for top players and no staff room for volunteers. Yeah, that's a bad sign. The players are obviously important and their experience is important, but their importance should be uniform in the sense that it should be good for everyone, which is why a VIP room is, to me, in an open bracket tournament is it's questionable. Also, when it comes to your event staff is very important. In fact, I think your collective event staff is more important than any one player, or it should be anyway. I also think of all the commentators, I probably have the lowest opinion about how valuable commentary is to an event. And that's probably from the person who takes it the most serious. I take commentary incredibly serious, and I think it's incredibly important. But I think most commentators think their position is more important than like other people in tournament staff and stuff. I don't necessarily think that's true. The context of that as a commentator is important. If you want to feel like you're more valuable, you have to prove it. And I don't think most people prove it. It's very rare that that's the case. I was just thinking about commentary, and I've been thinking about it lately. I wanted to make a tweet that was like, okay, if you had to, let's say, what fighting game commentator fits this description? Someone who's super hardworking. They work hard to be better at their job all the time. They take it very serious. They're very serious about their job. They take commentary very seriously. They always want to improve on what they do. They're timely. They are reliable. They're always going to show up and do the best job that they can. They're consistent. They don't show up and do a bad job sometimes, do a good job other times, right? If they're a hype commentator, they're always hype. They always bring everything to the table. They kill it. If they're an analyst, they're excellent at being an analyst. Whatever they do it better than anybody else. And they're just super timely about how they do their analysis. They're just really, really, really good. They don't stay out drinking all night. They don't go out drinking, or they don't go out partying, or they don't stay up late. They treat their job serious, and they don't smoke or drink or do anything while they're on commentary. They study for the event, right? Whether they're a hype commentator, they get ready for the event. They know what to look for. They play the game. They play the games often. That's a separate event. Play all the games often. They're familiar with the scene. They attend their locals. They make weekly content about fighting games. They have they're close to the pulse of the game, right? They're close to the pulse of the game. They attend the locals. They know what the community is like. Even something like they read the opinion, like public opinion, and they like consider that, and they review their own commentary. They study for events, right? They do all those things. So now that I've finished just all those things, who do you think matches that description? I've seen multiple answers that are factually untrue, and you know it and I know it. I think 95% are stricken when I say doesn't stay out late all night and always gets a lot of sleep before their shift, doesn't do any, doesn't drink or smoke or do anything like that. The list is very short, is my point. If the list is extremely short, then I think that what I said earlier about most commentators not having enough value to justify what they're asking for, I think it's because I don't believe that anybody puts in enough work to justify it. Not even just because, and that's because of ability, but also because of everything else. I think it's very rare that people put in enough work that I actually think to myself, this person is trying very hard in all the right areas, that they deserve, this kind of situation. I mentioned the background stuff because I think all of that is important to testify to the ability that you attempt to improve, or the ability you put in to be better, and also how you perform on the mic. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about other people. How many people does this check off the list? It's just good for food for thought, isn't it? When I see people say that they feel like they were left off commentary because they can't think of a reason. They're just so good and they didn't do anything wrong. And I think about this list of things that I expect from somebody who reasonably cares about their work. But I have high standards. I'm very, It happens all year long. There are people who are just like, I can't get commentary because they just always hire the same people. Fuck those guys. Yes, it's common. In this case, like a lot of people were talking about the Dragon Ball finals today. I really am sad that there's no international representation. When I was hired, I asked about international commentary. That was one of the things I asked about. The thing about fighting games is we have a lot of good streamers. Or good commentators. I think there's a large number of good commentators. But oftentimes, you're looking for great or exceptional commentators, which is why often, like those people, the people who are a step above in some aspect, it's like ability or they relationships or reliability or whatever it is, those are the people who get hired the most. Vicious has been working hard, yeah. The thing about Jeremy, or Vicious, is that he was on the entire Red Bull tour the whole year, right? If there's one thing that will improve you very fast is boot camp. So when we did Wizard World back in 2016, remember how we were just at an event every single month, and we were doing grassroots and like you were doing FGC events in the middle, right? There's a reason that Steve Ripp and I got so much practice, and we started getting hired for so many things so fast. Like, why do you think we all got picked to do E-League that year? We had just been in so many different places, and we had tried so many different things, and we had done so many different kinds of events, and we've done so many. We've been on the screen doing all kinds of dumb shit, and we had so much practice that by the end of the year we were just so seasoned that it was hard for anybody else to just have as much experience or be as like prepared for any different situation, right? So this year the Conquest events happened, and all the hosts on that, Steve, Yipes, Persia, and Vicious, got flown out to all these different events. So they're hitting like 1 to 2 events a month, and they have all the other events that they have on the side and everything. So when you have that, it's pretty easy for someone to, if they care, sit down and grind. He's a nice dude. Jeremy's a sweetheart. He's a shithead in game, but I love Jeremy. He's great. Logan has Shakespearean English. What the fuck does that mean? See, this is why I need an accent. I'll just get away with whatever. If I had an accent, y'all motherfuckers would be like, Sajam speaks so proper. He's got an Essex. He's from Essex. His accent is not even a cool English accent. I bet you get this a lot, but what is the most important thing for someone who's starting off in commentary? Being interested in what you're commentating. I think if you're not interested in whatever you're doing, you won't really want to commit the time and effort to get started. After that, you just have to jump into it and get in there. I often have people asking me for all kinds of advice, and it's like they're taking the SATs. They're trying to get all the answers for all the questions, but it's not like the SATs. You just have to try it. And you just have to do it a lot, and you're going to be really bad at it at first, and that's okay, but eventually you'll be better at it. Yeah, that's what I do. When I want to make videos, I just open something up and I start doing it. You have to jump into it. There's nothing stopping you from trying, right? And I'll tell you this. Just fair advice. If you're going to try to make content or commentary or do anything, like anything that takes skill, you'll probably not be very good at it at first, but over time you'll build up and be better.